May the words of my mouth and the meditations of each heart be holy and acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. You might have noticed a few weeks ago, but there was a lot of talk. There was a lot of talk about the end of the world. Well, the rapture, right? Or the second coming, really, but the end of the world nonetheless, because if that happens, things are going to be different, right? Some preacher predicted it would happen, and of course, it didn't. Preachers have been talking about that for a long time now. Preachers are like weird cultish leaders, right? Saying it's going to happen on this date, at this time, etc., etc. I don't know about you, but whether it's a sweaty preacher on TV or some guy in a jumpsuit with foil on his head in the desert, the older I get, the more I'm like, man, I hope it happens for you guys, but I don't want to be a part of it. You know, it's like you hearing about a party you just hope you don't get the invitation to. Because no matter what those guys are like, I'm going, I don't want to hang out with you for eternity, dude. Like I keep hearing about this party, but I really just want to go home and watch the Great British Baking Show, right? Plus, the scriptural witness, whenever it makes a mention or alludes to something like a return of Christ or a judgment day, it is, number one, ambiguous at best. There's not much there to hang a hat on. And number two, it is not concerned at all with the when and the where of it, and way more concerned with the who and what of it all. As in, who are we going to be now in this world, in this present time, and what kind of community should we be building together in this time of waiting? That's the context of Peter's first pastoral letter we just heard read, which, by the way, is quoted in this year's stewardship letter you might have already received in the mail. There's a sense of waitingness. Many in the early church believed that Christ's return was imminent. It was going to happen any day. But rather than speculate on a timetable of events, Peter reminds them to be a certain kind of people. He exhorts them to love. And that love takes a practical shape in the life of the community. You can almost imagine the question being asked, what does love look like at the end of the world? And Peter, the pastor, says, well, it looks like hospitality. But, and here's the kicker, hospitality without complaining. You see, there wasn't a church building in the first 200 years of Christianity. There were no church buildings. Thank God we got smart and built all these buildings, and there's never been a problem ever since. See, Christianity happened in and through people's homes, in their kitchens, in their living rooms, on their patios. So you needed a hospitable people for the gospel to be heard and growth to happen. Love at the end of the world looks like hospitality. It also looks like gratitude for the gifts, whether they be spiritual or material in nature, a daily recognition that all that we have ultimately is God's, and we hold them lightly at best. You probably could have guessed another one. It was right there in the reading. Service to others, the mutual upbuilding of people in your community or beyond the walls of your immediate community. It's here where you really get a sense. We really get to see that Peter is not urging the church to withdraw from the world or to enter some campaign to save their own and everyone else's soul, but rather thrusts them more into the world to love as Christ loved. And last, love at the end of the world looks like stewardship. To be, Peter writes, faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. We are to be faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. A steward in the urban Greco-Roman world of the Apostle Paul and the Apostle Peter was a trusted servant who the head of the house placed a particular kind of responsibility to manage either the inner workings of the estate or the outer workings of the estate. And Peter takes this rather economic and functionary term and expands it, gives it theological depth and existential meaning. We are stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Before I come to the close of a briefer sermon this morning, as we get to hear from our first stewardship speaker and want to be sensitive to our time, I want to ask a question. Where are you being called to be a more trusting, courageous, and creative steward right now? Where are you being called to be a more trusting, courageous, and creative steward right now? There's a song by the group REM. If you're a Gen Xer and younger, you know where I'm going with this. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. All right, I saw some of you. I get it, right? My favorite part of that song, I think, is everybody's favorite part. Leonard Bernstein. I'll stop. One of the things I love about that song that I've been listening to since I was in middle school is it taught me, eventually, that every morning when we wake to a world that has ended as we know it. But that does not mean the world has ended. It just means it has changed as we know it. Now, I must confess to you, I do not feel fine, as this world is strange and troubled. But it is not only that. There is light, too, and there is love, the kind of love that old Peter describes in his first letter. And St. Andrews, you embody that love in so many different ways, frail and imperfect as we might have it expressed sometimes, but it is still absolutely and resolutely there. I am grateful to be your rector and pastor and companion in ministry, and I'm excited to begin this new season of stewardship with y'all, even if it's at the end of the world as we know it. Amen.
Amen.